1. I grew up in a small town in the Piedmont region of Virginia. Rolling country hills, one high school, everyone was your neighbor, that sort of thing. It was me, my mother, my father, and my brother. And just for the purpose of the story, my brother is 6 years older than me. Well, my town is pretty small. As I said before, so small that my family, my grandmother, and her husband, and my great-grandmother and her husband, all lived in 3 separate houses, about 1 mile apart from each other. Once my great-grandfather died in 1989, my grandma moved in with her mother to help take care of her, as she was getting old in years herself. This didn't bother my grandma, as her and her husband's house was only 500 feet down the gravel road. I don't remember too much about my great-granny. I remember that she was always very grumpy, and she would always yell at my brother and I when we would go over her house to play. My brother and I would do this because our house was very small, and our great-granny's house was a big, open Cape Cod-style house, with plenty of room to run around and spread out our toys. When my great-granny passed away, in the first week of February 1994, it took a toll on my family because within that very same week, my grandfather passed away as well. This means my grandma lost her mom and her husband, both within about 5 days' time. I also need to mention that my great-granny was on hospice care, and she died in the comfort of her home, in her chair, surrounded by her family. As I grew in age, 8, 9, 10 years old, I started to retain a better memory about that house, and really just how creepy it was. The upstairs in particular, as my brother and I were never really allowed up there. This became especially true since my grandma ended up selling her and her husband's house down the gravel road, and permanently living in this one. And due to the trauma of losing her mother and husband in 1 week, she developed a pretty bad hoarding habit. Sometimes when my brother and I were visiting, my grandma would be occupied with her Avon downstairs, and we'd sneak upstairs to stoop through all 4 of the cluttered rooms. But one room up there always caught my attention. I found myself feeling very lightheaded whenever I'd go near, and sometimes feelings of unease or dread would overcome me. It was just your normal room. Very small, hardwood floors, and only a twin bed and a small dresser. Oh, and a lot of junk like old Christmas boxes, Avon products, and my great-granny's worn clothes. But over in the corner of the room, right beside a small crawl-in storage area, was a mirror. I always found myself strangely attracted to this mirror for some reason. It gave me an eerie sort of feeling, one I can still very much feel to this day. I often caught my brother giving it a strange glance every now and then too. It wasn't until I started seeing this mirror in my dreams that I started to question its history and why my consciousness was showing it to me in my sleeping state of mind. The dreams were very vivid, and as frightening as they were, I never questioned during my dream itself what was happening or why I was there. I sort of feel like I was there for a reason. They started with me standing on the porch of the house, staring at the door. It was nighttime, and quiet all around me with a slight breeze. A very warm and comfortable summer night. The dream progressed with me making my way into the house, except something was a bit off. I was floating, and whenever I'd enter a room inside, the door would open for me. All the lights were off inside, but I could still see from the full moon eerily casting its bright light through the open curtains, the outside breeze making the curtains dance around inside. Everything seemed to be in slow motion. I make my way upstairs, where I'm guided each time to the same room with the mirror. This is the part of the dream where I sense an impending feeling of doom. I make my way in front of the mirror, but oddly enough, I never see my reflection. I'm forced to stare at it when all of a sudden an apparition of my great-granny appears. Her skin looks grey and cold. Her eyes are dark and hollow. The uneasy feeling grows more and more as I stare and start to realize that I'm now aware I'm dreaming. I'm scared to death, and I need to wake myself up somehow. Then all of a sudden, the image in the mirror turns truly sinister. Her mouth widens, her eyes glow a deep shade of red, and she lets out the most terrifying scream. This is when I wake up, covered in sweat. I had that same exact dream a very many number of times growing up, but I never knew its significance, if there was any at all. I never told anyone, not even my grandma. Fast forward about 4 years ago, 2012. My grandma lost her battle to cancer on Mother's Day. My family and I took part in the huge responsibility of cleaning up that house, as we had plans to sell it and move to San Antonio, Texas, where we currently are. The dream had escaped me for some time. I had not had it in about 10 years. But when my brother and I, now in our 30s, had the duties of cleaning out that room, the eeriness of it all returned to me. "Had a lot of fun times up here snooping around, didn't we, little brother?" he said. "I don't remember too much of it, but yes, fun times," I said. My brother lifts his finger and points. "Hey, do you remember that mirror right there?" "Yes," I said. "It was always very creepy to me, but, why do you ask?" To which he replied, "Just wondering. I'm not sure if you ever knew, but that mirror was always Granny's favorite mirror from her childhood. And it just so happens that right below that mirror, directly parallel to downstairs, sits the chair that our great-granny died in." As if that didn't make my skin crawl enough. My brother then pauses for a brief second and grins, and with a confused look says, "You know, for some reason, I used to have the strangest dreams about that mirror." 2. In the 8th grade, my friend Amber and I had 1 semester of health and 1 semester of physical education. She and I had health together in the first semester of school. We both had some things happen to us that deserves its own story, but let's just say it involved sexual acts and questions. Anyway, we were never open about it, and never even talked about it unless we were alone. My health teacher was one hell of a guy. He was one of those teachers you have mixed feelings of, and always stares at one kid when he talks in class. He started off fine at the beginning of the year. He would teach us what we needed to know, and always repeated himself, especially on the depression and sexual assault units. Amber and I were always the 2 kids he stared at when he gave lessons. I don't really know why, since we both sat in the last row on opposite sides of the room. I didn't think too much of it, since it happened to me before. I started to like him as a teacher because he was one of the better teachers in that year. It was only until about October before things got a little bit off. He would always ask me to stay and help grade papers after class, even though I had another class to go to. It was odd. Like he knew my elective was the next period. At the time, I thought nothing of it. He always made me volunteer for class activities, and relied on me to give the students correct answers because, well, I want to be a radiologist, so I always paid attention. Whenever Amber and I were working together in class, he would always just stare at us, and I thought I saw him giving us a full up and down. Especially during the sexual assault unit, he would always stare at the both of us, emphasizing his words while doing, without fail, every single time. After the incident happened, that I mentioned in the beginning of this story, his creepiness level shot upwards, him acting more and more strange as the semester was coming to a close. We were watching a video about sexual assault one day, reminding us of these events, and we both sat, watching, just crying silently to ourselves. he couldn't see since he was sitting at his desk in the back of the room, or so we thought. Ever since then, he asked us if we were okay. If we ever needed help, go talk to him, blah blah blah. He would always give us these weird looks in class and would only stare at us when we were learning female and male anatomy. It was really awkward, but once, on a lighter note, my male band teacher walked into the theater where we were, stared at the board where a diagram of a vagina was, and noped the fuck out. It was amazing. Anyhow, in class, this teacher would just stare at us no matter what, even after we let the incident go. It's like he knew that something terrible happened to us. Before school one winter day, Amber was walking to school, and there were no other kids around at all, which is odd for a Wednesday morning. The white, unmarked, two-windowed van pulled up next to her and asked her, "Do you need a ride to school?" When she declined and left, the van followed her all the way up to school, where she told the front office, who called the police. While she was speaking with the police once they got there, guess who walked into the office? That's right, the creepy-ass health teacher. When he saw her, he just went on his way, looking back every so often, while he was walking down the hallway towards the health office. In 5th period, which was when I had his class, Amber and I were sitting in the chairs talking about God knows what, when Mr. Creepy walked up to us and said, "Amber, I saw you in the office today filing a police report. I heard that a student was followed to school this morning by a suspicious white van. Was that student you?" Amber and I just looked at each other, visibly uncomfortable, when she choked out, Yeah, why?" Mr. Creepy just stared at me next, while nodding to acknowledge Amber's response. "And you, Ellie," he said. Alarm bells went off since none of my teachers ever called me by my nickname. No teacher of mine knows it anyway, except for my band teacher, since he and my dad had a lovely 4-hour conversation on a bus ride to Disneyland. "Were you with Amber this morning? Are you two okay?" I shifted in my seat and responded, No, we're perfectly fine. Thank you for your concern." He eventually walked away. After a look of suspicion flooded his face, Amber and I gave the what the fuck face to each other. When he went to go talk to the other health teacher, nothing too out of the ordinary happened after that, other than a few strange glances, helping us get down from the theater stage even though it was a 2-foot drop to the ground. After a long semester, Amber and I left his class to go to physical education. I only saw him around school a few times after that, usually when I'm going to 1st period, and if he saw me, he would stare me down. I wasn't too hard to spot, since I sometimes got to school late. I'm sure I left out details, but I've blocked so much of it out, and so has Amber. We're both in high school now, so we never have to see him again, and that is something I am perfectly fine with. 3. This happened when I was 4 or 5 years old. I lived in a trashy, poor trailer house in Temple, Texas. It was roach-infested, but it seemed to be in good shape. The other trailers didn't seem so. I loved my room dearly. I'd always play with my little dolls and pony figures. I also watched Care Bears on my TV that I had. I remember accidentally locking my Peter Cottontail plush in my bathroom, and my dad had to unlock it with a key. Anyways, here's where it all started. I was in my room brushing my teeth and getting ready for bed. My mother came in, said goodnight and kissed me on my cheek, but as she left, I felt strange. Dread ran against my body. I've never felt it before until now. I looked around, to see nothing until my closet. I saw something in there. I asked who was there. They said, "Oh, I'm just a friend from the darkness." It floated out of my closet and scared the crap out of me. It was a black, wavy ghost figure with white, bloodshot eyes. As more came out from hiding, even one stared at me from the window. I hid under my covers. I said for them to go away as I shook in fear. I asked what they were. They said, "Us? Oh, we are the Edwins. A friendly ghost that lived here ever since this house was built." I didn't trust these dark, demonic figures. I felt that feeling that evil presences were in my room. I told them, again, to go away, but they just stood there and said, "Please, we want to play with you, Megan." I only felt more dread. How did they know my name? I screamed in my little head. I hid under my blanket and cuddled with my Care Bear plush, holding it tightly to my chest. The next morning I woke up, ate breakfast, and, hung out with my family. Played games with my dad on the Xbox 360, but later that day, at noon, I was in my room, playing with my pony figure. Then an Edwin appeared. "Hello again. Looks like you were having fun. Can I play too?" As I looked up, and trying not to express my fear, "Go away, I don't want to play with you," I said as I backed up in my bed. My mom entered the room, and the Edwin vanished. My mom asked me what's wrong, and who I was talking to. I sighed as I hugged my mother, and told her about these Edwins. My mother was worried and said, "Oh my, I'm so sorry, honey." She hugged me as I cried in fear. Of course, my father was at work, so he didn't know what was going on. My mom said in a soft voice, "It's okay, I'm here, I'm here," as she patted my shoulder. She told me not to worry about it, that they aren't real. Until I saw an Edwin and shouted, "There's one over there, look Mom, in the closet." I pointed at it as the Edwin stared at me with its soulless gaze. My mom looked over and told me, "Honey, I don't see anything." This made my mom worried, like I was the only one who could see them. She told me that she would call the church to anoint the house. Please note, my family are strong Christians, and we go to church every Sunday. That night I hid under my covers and I heard them sing a lullaby, a very eerie lullaby. It was very bone-chilling. I covered my ears as I hid under my blanket. I watched as the Edwins held hands and surrounded me on my bed. I ended up crying as I told them, "Enough," as they backed away, scared by my scream. They all vanished, however. One stayed and sat in my bed. It said, "Don't cry, Meg. We'll promise to play it nice," it said as it stared at me with those soulless, zombie-like eyes. I hopped up and ran into the living room. As I hopped on the couch and laid down and cried in a pillow. When I woke up on the couch, my mother asked me, "Why are you in here?" "When I left, you were in your room, baby." She sat by me as I wiped the sleep from my eyes. I told her that they sung a lullaby and I sung it to her. Her face turned cold. She said, "Okay, that is it. I'm going to call our pastor and his wife to come over and get rid of these evil spirits." She took out her cell phone and dialed their number. She went outside and talked to them. 58 minutes later, they arrived. My dad was home too and asked what was the problem. My mom explained to him and his fists closed tightly, as if he was going to punch someone or something in the face. The pastors anointed our trailer house. I heard a screech come out of my room, and I saw the Edwins fly out in terror. Then they vanished. I was happy, and my parents and I thanked our pastors as they left. Skip to a few years later. We're now living at my Meemaw's house, but they came back, and worse than before. They were not hiding just in my room, but all over the entire house. I was probably 6 or 7 when I first moved there. I met new friends, Katie, Jasmine, and Jamie. They were all sisters. I remember I told them about these Edwins. That if they catch you, you'd become a frog and be eaten by the snake they owned. Of course they freaked out and said, "But do they have a weakness?" Katie asked. I told them that we could go Edwin hunting to find them, then spray them with water. They always hated water. Anyways, fast forward to 2 months, I told my mother again, and she called the pastor and blah blah blah. Did the same thing as last time. However, they left forever. I'm now 13, and I still spot Edwins roaming around other homes, but I'm glad they finally left me alone. 4. Before I get started, I was a 13-year-old girl living with my dad, as my mom got killed in an accident. I live in an apartment building where you have to call up a person who lives there to be able to get into the building. Well, I was home alone, as my father wouldn't be home for a while, since he has to work the night shift. I was sitting on my couch on my laptop when I got a phone call. I wasn't expecting any visitors. I just figured they got the wrong number. When you aren't expecting anyone, you just don't answer it. I believe that's what saved my life. But then it rang again. I thought maybe it was my dad, but why is he coming home early, I thought. I picked up the phone, and I heard heavy breathing on the other side. I just put the phone down and became a little paranoid. Then the phone rang again. I answered it thinking maybe it's my father this time, but then again, the breathing started, and I said, "Hello?" like 5 times, but then they just hung up. I was confused for a second, then just shook it off. I was getting comfy on my couch, then I heard another ring. I was paranoid at the moment, so I picked up the phone and heard the heavy breathing. I got really mad and yelled, "What do you want?" Then I heard a really low male voice say, "Hey, Bella." I was freaked out and said, "How do you know my name?" "Your mom asked me to pick you up." I was freaking out by now, as I said my mom wouldn't be able to say that. Then I heard, "Bella, let me in." I then screamed, "No!" Then he got angry and said my whole name. "Let me in." I froze. How would he know my full name? "I know everything about you. You're 5'4", you're 13, and you're scared of spiders." I looked through my window, as I had a view of where people called to be let in from the gate. He was a tall male, maybe 6'7", and he was nicely dressed and good-looking. He was looking right up at me. I was screaming inside, and I hung up the phone. I called my dad, and he came home early. Thank God the man didn't get in. But I'm just wondering, how did he know everything about me? Now, I'm a 16-year-old girl, and I still have nightmares about this man. Yesterday, I was out with my boyfriend and his friends. I felt safe because my boyfriend was fairly buff. I felt someone watching me. I froze when I heard a whisper, "Bella, psst, Bella, over here." I turned behind me and saw the man. I screamed. Everyone looked at me and was confused. I hid behind my boyfriend and whispered, "That guy has been stalking me since I was 13. My boyfriend walked over to where the guy was. He found a knife, tape, and a rope. I believe that if I wasn't with my boyfriend and his buff friends, I wouldn't be here today. 5. So I'm a 19-year-old female who lives with my stepmom and father. Besides Reddit, I wasn't sure where to send this sort of thing, but I decided to finally write down my sleep paralysis experience after my most recent episode. I call them episodes because for a little over a year now, I've been experiencing sleep paralysis about 3 to 4 times a month. But to the story. I remember somewhat waking up. Not waking up early one morning. I'm guessing it was morning because I could vaguely make out shapes and shadows and random parts of my room. Sleep paralysis is weird. I can somewhat sense when I awake to it. My body feels heavy, numb, and sort of disconnected to my brain, if that makes any sense. In other words, everything below my eyes is practically dead. Now, I've usually only experienced auditory and touch hallucinations, but in this case, as my eyes wandered around my room to the picture, my POV, I lay on my right side, and from where I'm laying, my closet door and main bedroom door is in my view, both of which are always closed at night. My closet door is creaky and sits on its original hinges still, so when it opens, you can hear it from halfway across the house. Anyways, at first I hear both doors opening, closing, and repeating simultaneously. It occurred to me I was, in fact, having another episode. You just know. As the episode progressed visually, the hallucinations began. My bedroom and closet door both start opening and closing repeatedly, robotically and rather unnaturally. I half expected to see some crazed demon messing with my door, but from beyond both door frames was, well, nothing. Black. An unnatural black that I cannot even begin to describe, other than veil-like and menacing. As I said, my closet door is loud and extremely annoying. The noise radiated through my room at high volume. I wished and fought to regain my mobility, to simply just plug my ears and end the noise torture. As soon as it had all begun, it all ended suddenly. Both doors were closed, seemingly untampered with. My door even had my cat sleeping in front of it, just as he was a few hours before. And that cat is a light sleeper. Gradually, I began to bring myself back to life. These experiences usually last about 4 minutes if I had to guess. This one felt like an eternity, and a single instant all in one. I mentioned my most recent episode to my stepmom later that day. She had slept soundly, no noise, nor closet door sounds. I considered myself lucky I didn't see anything scary. I know that some people are very scarred by their experience with the same things. All I can say is, you're safe. And from everything I've experienced so far, I've managed to wake up every time. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here. And thank you very much for listening to my latest subscriber stories video. I might have to rename these paranormal subscriber stories if it keeps up like this. You guys have had some really unfortunate experiences with ghosts and spirits and whatnot out there. Many thanks to the good folks, all 5 of them who sent their stories in. If you would like to send me a story, then please do. The link is in the description down below, and not just this video, in any video. If you'd like to send a story in, that would be appreciated. Also, can I just add before I go, I know these stories sound somewhat fantastical. And please bear in mind when you're expressing yourself in the comments that some of the authors of these stories are quite young. So just imagine how you would feel if you were that age and someone was saying kind of nasty things about you. This doesn't apply to most of you, but please, the ones that it does apply to, just think before you type. That's all I'm asking. Okay, it's getting late where I am, and by late I mean I can see daylight. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.